Welcome to Sisters Place Inspiration and Entertainment Show interviews with authors, celebs, and much more with hostesses Latrice Carter and Selena Haskins.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Sisters Place podcast. Super excited. I am your host, Latrice Carter. My co-host Selena is out this week, but she will be back. Today's show highlights features an interview with Aaliyah Bundles, music from Shameia Crawford, and of course, my thoughts. But before we get into our interview, let's hear Shameia Crawford's Heartbeat. Check it out.
Like the love a mother has for a baby, even when they're grown, they can do no wrong. And what I feel for you's no exception. We made a vow to stay, come what may. There's been times I let you down, sometimes it was both our fault, but you never dared to change, and your passion stayed the same for me. Yeah. You're my heartbeat. Oh, I got this deep love for you, babe. Deep in my soul, my heart goes. At times I just expected you to leave me, 'cause the human in me didn't want to change. We didn't come into this thing squeaky clean, baby, but the nature of our love washes every stain away. There's been times I let you down, sometimes it was all my fault, but you never dared to change, and your heart stayed the same for me. That show love kind of love, you can't deny what it is. It keeps you going, it make you feel so good, deep down inside. Oh, oh, oh. You are my redemption, 'cause we are not perfect at all, but we love so unconditional. Nothing will ever come between us. You're my anybody know what I'm talking about? The kind of love to make you go crazy in a good way. Oh, so enough run deep down. Yeah, yeah. It's the reason I live. It's the love that keeps me going, and it grows, and it grows. I love you deep. Yeah, yeah. Oh, my heart goes. Oh, flowing through my veins. Your love, flowing through my veins. Anybody know about this love? Ooh, oh, yeah.
Woo! That was Shameia Crawford, Heartbeat. Woo, that song is good. Ain't y'all feeling good right now? Woo, I love it. That is a good song for today. Ladies and gentlemen, you gotta get her music. Check her out. Follow her on social media. Shameia Crawford. Check her out. You will love. She has a beautiful voice. So I encourage you to check her out today. Now, our feature interview. Man, I was so honored to do this interview earlier this week. Just so you guys know, all of our interviews are pre recorded just so that we can be able to bring you a phenomenal show. I love it. And this week I had the honor of interviewing the one and only Alelia Bundles. Now, I know some of you are going, who is that? Well, let me tell you about her. She is an author, journalist, public speaker, and after a 30-year career as an executive and Emmy Award winning producer with ABC News and NBC News, she is now a brand historian for MCJW, a line of hair care products inspired by her great great grandmother, Madam C.J. Walker. I had the pleasure of sitting down with her to talk about her biography in her own words, the life and times of Madam C.J. Walker. As many of you may have watched the Netflix series Self Made, that was the inspiration for the fictionalized series based loosely on her biography about her great great grandmother, Madam C.J. Walker. Now, she talks about the importance of knowing your family history and her fifth book that will be about her great grandmother, titled The Joy Goddess of Harlem, Alelia Walker and the Harlem Renaissance. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my interview with Alelia Bundles. All right. Tonight, I am going to be talking with a phenomenal woman who I am had the pleasure of watching and reading her bio, learning a little bit more about her. And a lot of you know who her great great grandmother is, but we're going to learn a lot more about her tonight. So tonight, I want to welcome to Sisters Place podcast, Alelia Bundles. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be with you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So, on her own grounds, the life and times of Madam C.J. Walker, the nonfiction biography that was the inspiration for the fictionalized net series Self Made. What was the inspiration behind you writing this story about your great great grandmother, Madam C.J. Walker?
I grew up in a household with a mother who was vice president of the Madam C.J. Walker Manufacturing Company. So this story was very much a part of my life. As a little girl, I discovered things that had belonged to Madam Walker and her daughter, Alelia Walker, in my late grandmother's apartment, in her dresser drawer. There were things like Madam Walker's opera glasses, mother of pearl opera glasses. The silverware that we used every day had CJW, Madam Walker's monogram on it. Mm-hmm. So I was really surrounded by things that had belonged to these Walker women, but my mother was wise enough not to make it a big deal. So it just was part of my life. And I really was not trying to be totally focused on that. I was trying to live my own life and do other things. I wrote a report about Alelia Walker in the Harlem Renaissance when I was a senior in high school, literally 50 years ago. But it was really when I was at Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism in 1975 when my advisor, Phyllis Garland, the only Black woman on the faculty, recognized my unusually spelled name, A''Lelia, and asked if I had a connection to Madam Walker and A'Lelia Walker. And when I said yes, she said, that's what you're going to write your master's paper about. So it was really the power of a professor who both affirmed the importance of the story and in many ways gave me permission to explore my family story.
Okay. Were you ever afraid of showing too much about Madam C.J. Walker in your story, that the family would be upset or uncomfortable with you sharing all this information to the world?
No, I really wasn't. When I was in graduate school working on this first really major paper about Madam Walker, my mother was in the hospital. She was terminally ill with cancer, and I had gone home to Indianapolis from New York for the Christmas holidays. And I had just really started the research, and I was finding these weren't really, not really scandalous, but, it was beyond the story of Madam Walker was born on Sarah Breedlove on the plantation in Delta, Louisiana, orphaned at 7, married at 14, a mother at 17, a widow at 20. Her hair fell out, and then she developed a hair care product and became a millionaire. That was kind of the story.
Right.
But I discovered, okay, she'd been divorced, and but again, nothing really, seriously scandalous. But I asked my mother in her hospital bed. I said, "So, Mommy, I'm doing this report, and I'm starting to find out things that are, beyond the sort of little cliched story about her. And what do I do about that?" And she said, "Tell the truth, baby. It's all right to tell the truth." And that really was one of my last conversations with my mother. So unlike a lot of families who feel they have to keep secrets, I did not have that burden and really had permission. So that when I see the things that are actually made up in the Netflix series, these aren't true stories about my family. I tell the true story about my family. A lot of those things that are in the series that people might find scandalous or controversial are not things that actually happen.
Okay. Good. They had to sell it. They had to sell a series, pretty much.
I guess, but I think Madam Walker's life is, quite interesting. I think the facts are quite interesting. I do understand, literary license, creative license in trying to tell a story, but I do think that, especially with iconic historical figures who people really don't know very much, if anything, about, that the first pass on these stories, I do think there's a responsibility to try to stick at least to the core of who the person is. Obviously, a Hollywood movie is not going to be a documentary. It's not going to be entirely factual. They're composite characters. But I think that we learn so little accurate American history about people of color that there is some responsibility to try to the first time that people hear about it, to leave them with impressions that are mostly right or authentic to the person.
Okay, and that leads us right into our next question. What type of impact do you want to have on your readers and young adults after they have read On Her Own Ground, The Life and Times of Madam C.J. Walker, or seen the Netflix limited series Self-Made?
I will say, when I wrote On Her Own Ground, I really was trying to document Madam Walker's life, and I knew that it would be the first time that many people read anything about her, and so I wanted to put the facts there. I had written a young adult book in 1991, 10 years earlier, so my first real book audience was young readers. And I know from the letters I've gotten for the last 30-some years, the email now emails, that young people are inspired by Madam Walker, that there are so many young people who, are Madam Walker doing Black History Month and Women's History Month, and who write their National History Day report. So I really love for them to be able to find the fact that she was an entrepreneur, that she was a philanthropist who contributed to Black schools, that she was a political activist who encouraged her sales agents to support the anti-lynching movement. So all of those things are very important to me, and I think those are the things that inspire people. So that's when I'm writing nonfiction, that's my goal, and to show how she empowered other women and created jobs. The Netflix series, I think Octavia Spencer is great. And she, I think, embodies Madam Walker's sort of courage and tenacity. But the details of the Netflix story are not really historically accurate. And people really should not think that they are historically accurate. I hope that it will encourage them to want to read the books and read some of the nonfiction work about her.
Okay, and read the truth.
Well, that's kind of the way it is.
Yeah.
But, you know, at the same time, it is an interesting phenomenon because millions of people now know Madam Walker's name who never would have known her name.
Very
and
true.
There are many people who worked so hard on that series. Again, Octavia Spencer is fantastic. Demaine Davis, I happened to be on set the day that she went, well, she was directing the last 2 episodes, but my one day on the set was one of the days when she was directing, and it was just such a joy to see her and how masterful she was, and to see how hard the actors worked, and not just the actors, the makeup people, the hairdressers, the set people, all of the props people. They worked so hard on that to bring this story to life, and now that has had a big impact, and people are talking about it, so that gives me a chance to tell the story.
Absolutely. I love Demaine. She is amazing. And I think, and you're right, to have more people know about Madam C.J. Walker who didn't know about her before, which is good, yes. On DC Talk, I sat and I watched that, and you talked about how important it is for us to know our history and our genealogy. Why is family history and knowing where we come from so important, particularly for the Black family?
I decided a long time ago that I was going to write the books that I wish had been written for me, because when I was growing up and taking history classes, we never appeared in those history books, except one time in my junior year in high school. The only time Black people were mentioned in my history book was as slaves. And, you know, now we say enslaved people to give people humanity, but it was slaves, and the textbook actually said they were contented. And I knew that wasn't true, but I was in a predominantly white school, and I didn't have the tools that I needed to fight back and to challenge that. And so I spend almost every single day of my life now documenting the contributions of African Americans and showing that our narrative really was erased. And I think that many people are just bored by history. I was probably bored by history, but when I started seeing my family and the Black community in the story of American history, then I realized how much we've done to contribute to this country. And if we are ignorant of that, we will believe the lies that people tell us. So I think it is our responsibility to learn as much as we can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that we know our history and not someone else telling us what our history is.
Yeah. Right. Or just telling us we don't have any history. That's the, and there are people in high places in America right now who are entirely ignorant.
Oh, yes.
Of what people, the contributions that we make, and who live in white privilege and who refuse to acknowledge or learn. They have no intention of ever trying to learn. So we have to know who we are.
Absolutely. Now, in the Netflix series, Self-Made, did you have any input into the storyline to ensure that Madam C.J. Walker was being portrayed authentically? I mean, I know it's commercialized, but did you have any type of input into the storyline for the series?
That's a really excellent question, and people, the way that Hollywood works is not what most people deal with every day. But in my case, what happened is this. My book was optioned by Mark Holder and Wonder Street, a production company. And then they met with Octavia Spencer, and she agreed to sign on not just as the lead, but as an executive producer. And Wonder Street secured a writer, Nicole Jefferson Asher. And it was one of the reasons that I signed with Mark Holder and Wonder Street, is that I really thought Mark respected my research and my work. And it was my impression that I would have been involved with in the meetings that the head writer and others had with the studio.
Okay.
But I quickly learned that I was being excluded from that conversation. And even though I had script review, the head writer and others decided that they did not want me in the conversation. I had one conversation with Ms. Jefferson Asher, and she talked about her ideas for having the Annie Malone, who becomes Addie Monroe in the film, to have a major part of the film be a conflict between Madam Walker and her rival. And in that conversation, my first conversation with her, I said, well, I think that is, Annie Malone is a character who should be in a series if you're talking about Madam Walker's life, but I don't really see that as the main narrative of Madam Walker's life. It wasn't the most important thing to her, so I wouldn't make it main thing. And apparently she was really determined that that's what she wanted, and so she left me out of the conversations until after the script had been, or the basic storyline had been approved by the studio. So by the time I was able to review the scripts, my contract said that I had the right to review the scripts. I reviewed each of the 4 scripts, but by that time, the storyline had already been approved by the studio. So I made what they call notes in Hollywood, as folks will know. You read a script and you make notes, and that means recommendations and criticisms and things that you like. And I made extensive notes on the script on things that I thought were not plausible or that I thought would be out of place. But the storyline was set in stone by that time. And some of my suggestions were incorporated, but many of them were not.
Oh, okay. Thank you for sharing that. What would you say to the critics who didn't feel the series was a true representation, even though in their mind they're not thinking commercial, for Hollywood? This is for Hollywood. They may have felt that this wasn't a true representation of Madam C.J. Walker, because when I was doing some research, there was a lot of bloggers who were like, no, this is not who she was, because they're only going off of what they've been already told in history about her, the limited information that's out there. What would you say to those critics?
Well, there actually, if people read my book, there actually is a lot of information. So if they haven't read the book, then it's limited information. My websites, AleliaBundles.com and MadamCJWalker.com, have a great deal of information about Madam Walker. And Madam Walker is in 200 books. I have 200 books on my shelves that she's in. So she's not, not entirely obscure.
Right.
But I understand that a lot of people don't know a lot about her. But I have to say, I think many of the critics were right in their assessment.
Oh, okay.
I think that I am glad that the series was done. I wish that it had been, it had been truer to who Madam Walker was. But the head writer and the showrunners had their concept, and that is, that's what creatives do. They change things. I think that a lot of people really wish that it would have been closer to Madam Walker's story. There is entirely enough drama in her real life. And I think the things that I've read that people objected to were things that I actually had some concerns about.
Oh, okay.
The focus on the rivalry between the Addie Monroe / Annie Malone character was hyped and was much exaggerated. The two women were rivals, but not in the way that they were portrayed in the film. Annie Malone, the original Annie Malone, was not a light-skinned woman, so colorism was not a significant factor in their rivalry, but that then becomes the central part of their rivalry. The character, A'Lelia Walker, that character is really kind of a flighty person, and it really, for me, does not portray the real A'Lelia Walker. I'm writing, I'm almost finished the major biography of her, and she's very different from the character who appears in the film. Esther is a made-up character. The head writer and the showrunners seem to want to have developed a lesbian relationship, and they use that as a way to create conflict between Madam Walker and A'Lelia Walker, when in reality the conflict between mother and daughter was over two men, both doctors, both handsome, who were boyfriends of Lelia's, and her mother preferred one over the other because one was a really good guy and one was kind of a bad guy, but he was a doctor but with swagger. So that was the real story, but they decided to change that. And then F.B. Ransom, Madam Walker's attorney, was one of the things that I know about him is he was really a straight arrow. His grandchildren are friends of mine, and I have done tons of research on him. So I know that he played a much more substantial role. That was an opportunity to have a strong male character, and he would never have bet on the numbers. Sweetness was a made-up character, but he would never have gambled, and it leaves you with the impression that in order for a Black business to succeed, there has to be something shady.
Right.
So those are things that were problematic for me, and I think those are the things that the critics have also raised.
Yeah, and that's what I was. I read a lot of those, and they were bringing that up. Do you think that there will ever be like a true documented story about Madam C.J. Walker, like to really show more about her?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, my book is really kind of the starting point. Really, we're really fortunate that one of the reasons that Madam Walker is more well remembered than some of her contemporaries, including Annie Malone, is that she surrounded herself with really talented people. Her attorney, F.B. Ransom, kept the legal issues at bay, kept the company day-to-day operations running. One of her secretaries who started working for her in 1914, who was still working at the company in 1979, saved almost every piece of paper. And those more than 40,000 documents, photographs, business records are at the Indiana Historical Society and have been digitized. So we really can document Madam Walker's wealth. And I also have my own personal Madam Walker family archives with things that my family saved. So we have the ability to tell Madam Walker's story in detail. There actually is a 1989 documentary called $2 and a Dream, produced by Stanley Nelson, who is a very well-known African-American documentary filmmaker, who just did the Miles Davis documentary, who did Tell Them We Are Rising about HBCUs, and about a dozen other films. But that was his very first film. And he had an inside track because his grandfather was F.B. Ransom. So our families knew each other, and people can actually now see that documentary on YouTube. He just released it for public consumption for free, and it has more than 130,000 views in less than a week because people are really hungry for the truth about Madam Walker. So I think the Netflix series, I'm so glad that it was highly rated on Netflix, because that means there's no one can ever say a Black story does not sell. Now the challenge is to tell the story again. And so I'm writing a book about A'Lelia Walker. I certainly would like to be able to see that produced. I don't think that this has to be the only film about Madam Walker. There are other famous people who have more than one film about them. I am interested in doing other nonfiction pieces about her. So I think this is a starting point, and I think that we have to think in terms of abundance as opposed to scarcity.
Yes, I agree. Thank you for that. Now, I did read on your website, and you just said it yourself, you are writing your fifth book about your great-grandmother, A'Lelia Walker, who you were obviously named after. Such a beautiful name.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So can you tell us what inspired you to write The Joy Goddess of Harlem, A'Lelia Walker and the Harlem Renaissance?
Sure. So when I was writing On Her Own Ground, and this was in the late 90s, that book came out in 2001 originally. It's now called Self-Made to tie in with the movie series. But when I was writing that, I started out thinking I was going to write a double biography of these two amazing women. And about a third of the way through, I realized that A'Lelia Walker needed her own book. So what I tried to do in On Her Own Ground was to develop the relationship between the two women. And I was able to do that because we have hundreds of their letters that allow me to show what they were saying to each other and what they were thinking about and what their relationship was like. So at the end of the original On Her Own Ground, my afterword was about 10 or 12 pages that described A'Lelia Walker's life after Madam Walker's death. Madam Walker died in 1919. A'Lelia Walker died in 1931. So I wanted to give people a little bit of a tease about this book that I'm currently writing. And I realized that she just really needed her own book. And even from writing that original book, I have learned so much more because I've had another couple of decades to be able to fill in the blanks about A'Lelia Walker. And I've discovered she's so much more a patron of the arts than she's been given credit in other books about the Harlem Renaissance. She traveled internationally. She went to Paris, London, Rome for the coronation of the Pope, Cairo, Palestine, Addis Ababa to visit the Ethiopian Empress. She traveled internationally. She was very much a citizen of the world, but somehow she has gotten caricatured into a paragraph in many books where they say, Madam Walker made the money, her daughter spent the money, all she did was have parties, she really wasn't a patron of the arts, and she had a short attention span. So, I just think, like, nobody can be that two-dimensional, but I think that was an easy narrative for people who had not really done their original primary source research. So that's part of the reason that I am really eager to finish this book so that it will be out next year.
Oh, awesome. I will be getting the first one, this last one, On Her Own Ground, The Life and Times of Madam C.J. Walker. I like collecting books about us, about people in our history who had a proud impact for my kids and grandkids to come. And then I'm looking forward to reading The Joy Goddess of Harlem, A'Lelia Walker and the Harlem Renaissance. So what nuggets of wisdom can you leave us with today?
Well, I think for me, the core message of Madam Walker's life is that she was a woman who was lifted up by other women. It was the women of her church, St. Paul AME, who saw that this washerwoman who was uneducated had some spark. And they tapped into that and they began to give her a vision of herself as something other than an illiterate washerwoman. And when she began to become successful, she used that kindness that other people had expressed towards her and turned it around to help other women. She provided jobs for thousands of Black women who otherwise would have been maids and washerwomen and cooks and sharecroppers, and allowed them to have independent income so they could educate their children and buy real estate, buy homes, and then create some generational wealth. At her convention, 1917 convention, her first national convention, probably one of the first conventions of women entrepreneurs in America, she gave prizes not just to the women who sold the most products, but to the women who contributed the most to charity. And she told them, as Walker agents, your first duty is to humanity. I want others to look at us and realize that we care not just about ourselves, but about others. So she was talking about legacy. And then I will just finally say that when people asked her the secret to her success, she would say to them, there is no royal flower-strewn path to success. And if there is, I have not found it. For whatever success I have attained has been the result of much hard work and many sleepless nights. I got my start by giving myself a start. So don't sit down and wait for the opportunities to come. You have to get up and make them for yourself.
Oh, that is a golden nugget right there.
Her life is full of nuggets. That's why I'm glad that the Netflix series has us talking about her. I appreciate the hard work of the people who put it together. Love what Octavia Spencer did, and now I am ready to have more people know the truth of her story and to do other projects.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on to Sisters Place podcast to share your story about your great grandmother and your grandmother and your great grandmother. All these greats. Now that's golden when you can go back and share the history about your ancestors. And I know when I saw you on DC Talk, you said you don't have to write to share your story if you don't have anyone famous in the family. You still need to write your story, your family's history.
Listen, I am almost finished with a book called The Yellow House by Sarah Broom.
The Yellow House, okay.
The Yellow House by Sarah Broom. And Sarah Broom is a native of New Orleans, and she had a big family, and she worked for Oprah magazine for a while. Then she lived overseas, and she's just gone back to. She's written about the journey of her family and who they were, just sort of everyday people, and their struggles and their triumphs, and then how Katrina affected them and how they survived. But everybody's got something good. I mean, she just tells a really good story. You can't say those are famous people, but
Right.
Those are real people who represent all of us. And I think everybody's family has a great story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you got me thinking about mine. Like, we need to write our family story.
Do it, sis. Do it.
I've been talking to my cousin about it because he's our family historian. So we're gonna get together in 2 weeks via virtual video since we're quarantined, unfortunately. So we can start this process and start collecting data.
Well, that's great. And sometimes when you have to slow down like we are right now, then that's when you are able to do things like that, because you'd always have an excuse to be going here and there, and maybe being quarantined, even though it's not a great thing, maybe there's some gifts that come out of it.
Yes. I've been seeing people tweet that and say that, we got all this time on our hands now because we're all at home. This is the time to do those projects and write that story and do whatever. And it's very true, very true. So I'm excited and I'm geeked, and I am going to pick up that book too, The Yellow House too, because I love reading.
Well, it is really good, and I've actually been listening to it on audio because my gym is closed, and when I would go to the gym in the morning on the elliptical, that's when I got a lot of reading done. So now I have to jog, which I don't like. But the good news is that I can listen on audio, and it's really good on audio because you get the reader has a really good New Orleans accent, and you feel like you're there. But either way, it's a beautifully, beautifully written book.
Okay. Well, we look forward to also having you on the cover of our July issue at Sisters Place. So everyone,
I'm thrilled about that. Believe me, my friend.
Well, I will send you a digital copy of our April issue that just released, so you can check that out. And we are so geeked and wired over here. So my team is excited. Marcy's excited. So we're just like full of joy. Like, oh, wow, we can talk about so much.
That's right. And we've got to find the joy right now. No question.
Yes. Well, thank you again for sitting down with me tonight. I will post this with our podcast next Saturday, and I will tag you and also tag all the promo. Awesome.
Excellent. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Wow. So what do you guys think about that interview with the one and only Miss A'Lelia Bundles? After I sat and listened to that interview, it inspired me to learn more about my family, so much that I'm doing the ancestry DNA testing So I'm really geeked about that. Um, it's really important, and she stressed this, to know your family history, especially for the black family. It's not about having a famous person in your family. It's truly about knowing your family history, where we come from, our roots, our legacy. So, with that being said, get yourself a copy of her book, in her own words, The Life and Times of Madam C.J. Walker. It's temporarily named Self Made to match the Netflix series Self Made. I will share on our social media platform her book and photo with links to follow her on social media. Make sure you visit her website to learn more about her, Madam C.J. Walker, and the next book about her great grandmother, Alelia Walker. Now, in this time, I feel like we need some words of encouragement. So I saw this post on Instagram last week, and it says this: it doesn't get easier, you get stronger. So, what does that mean to me? It means even though we have been stricken with this COVID 19, this journey has not been easy for any of us. But know that we will get stronger as we practice the rules for social distancing and we stay at home. If you don't have to go out, stay at home. You're not just doing this for yourself, but you're doing it for your family, your loved ones, your friends. Just remember, we are all in this together, and the time is now for us to stand in unity and help one another. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast and that you have some takeaways. For me, those takeaways is to know your family history, write your story, and know where you come from, know your roots. And if you need to ask questions about how Miss Bundles got started with researching her family, send her a message. She does respond. So send her a message, either reach out to her on her website and email her, or catch her on social media and send her a message. She is a wonderful spirit, and I am truly inspired by her work. She wears many hats, so I look forward to supporting her and seeing more projects from her. Now, if you enjoyed today's music by Shameia Crawford, Heartbeat, that was very nice, right? Make sure you check her out. And if you would like to get your music played on Sisters Place podcast, send me an email at latrice at sistersplace.com. And if you are a poet or you speak spoken word, you can record a 7 minute voice recording. No profanity, no discrimination, no racial slurs. You can send that to the same email address and we will play it on our show. Also, if you'd like to be a featured guest, send us a message either on our social media or email me at latrice at sistersplace.com. And if you missed this recording, don't worry. You can catch us on iHeart, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, and the Spreaker Radio Network. We are all over. So you can just click, download, follow us so that you don't miss any of our podcasts. Thank you all for listening to today's show. Please remember to stay safe, stay healthy. If you don't have to go out, please stay home. This too shall pass. To all of our healthcare workers, first responders, grocery store workers, and all of our essential workers, we at Sisters Place, we say thank you. Thank you for doing what you do best and getting us through this pandemic. You are all in our prayers. So let's keep doing what we're doing. Be blessed, you guys. And until next time, I am your hostess, Latrice Carter, at Sisters Place. And on behalf of Selena Haskins, my co host, we say go forward, press, be strong, and be encouraged. God bless.